to the showcase, baby. The showcase. Righteous mind. It's your time to shine. The showcase. Righteous mind. It's your time to shine. The showcase.
Welcome to the showcase. We have self-published author Miss Vie Cine, straight out of Massachusetts. We want to welcome her and talk about her wonderful career, her book, and the things that she's going through, and her future in media and books and things like that. So we want to welcome her, Miss Vie Cine.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little about yourself.
Well, my name is Vie Cine. I am a first-time self-published author. My book is titled Memoirs of a Forgotten Child, and it will be available for purchase on Amazon Kindle on August 1st. I came up with the concept of wanting to write a book because at 21, I just graduated college with a bachelor's in psychology, and my first job outside of college was in the social work field, and I was running into a lot of women with their children and families who were of need. And at the time, I was writing, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to focus on, but I was writing, and I just focused on writing about my life. And when it came to my life, like you will find out in Memoirs of a Forgotten Child, it is centered around abuse. And a lot of these women, they have came to me in private to talk about their abuse when they were children and their generational, what I call generational curses of, abuse stemming in the family. And they would come to me in confidentiality, but they didn't want to speak their truth. And I realized when it comes to the Black community specifically, we don't have a model of people who've gone through abuse, who put themselves out there as an example, as a model. And, they went through the healing process and became something. We usually hear in the media in general, either abuse and it was really, really bad, or you hear, they've overcome abuse, but you don't really hear about their journey. You don't really hear about the healing process. So that's when I decided that I would put myself out there so other people who've gone through abuse, they don't feel like they're alone or they're ashamed. And I wanted to knock down the walls of the taboo when it comes to abuse, because obviously it's not a topic that everybody wants to talk about. It's not, ponies and rainbows, but it happens quite often in families. And I felt like bringing this topic to the forefront, as much as it's taboo, is really needed.
Okay, so this is mostly about women abuse or just children abuse? Which is it more centered around women, or is it both women and men?
The story is more autobiographical. It's about my life, and you see throughout the book that yes, it's centered around abuse and it's centered around me, but you also see that abuse has followed through everybody else in the book, and it's kind of like how would I say it's kind of like spreading. Everybody has their own story. Everybody has gone through some form of abuse, but no one really talks about it. It's kind of like compounding, and I'm the one you see who goes through these abuses, who has the guilt, the shame, the fear, the typical emotions that come from abuse, and I'm actually exposing how I feel. When it comes to a lot of people who go through abuse, there is a cognitive dissonance where you don't talk about it, you don't experience it, you try to push through. And with this book, I want you to really get an inside look about how trauma affects somebody, because it's usually not spoken about, and when it is spoken about, it's spoken from like a clinical point of view, but you really never get the nitty-gritty view of it at real time from a real person who goes through it. So that's what I really wanted to put out there. It's not a secondhand experience or an expert experience. It's someone who's been through it, and these are the raw emotions and thoughts of the person going through it.
Oh, that's good. Um, and I can see in your body language that it's really emotional for you. But why? My question would be, if there were so many people who really couldn't bring themselves to talk about it, how did you get enough courage to at least write about it?
Well, it took me 21 years to even acknowledge that, not necessarily that it was a wrong thing, that it's taboo, but it needs to be talked about. I mean, like I said, it's not a topic that a lot of people want to talk about. And even when it comes to rape statistics, the majority of rapists will never face justice because the majority of people who've been raped or violated don't press charges. It's not something that's open. We all have the conversation with our parents, safe touch, and don't, let someone take advantage of you. But no one really talks about what you do in that moment or what you do after. And there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of shame, guilt, and fear when it comes to talking about your truth. So most people don't even acknowledge it. And in the Black community, the statistics show that the majority of Black women, by the time they reach 18, will face some type of sexual violation. So it's only right that we have these conversations because it's not going anywhere. So if we don't talk about it, it's just going to become a bigger issue.
That's so true. Now, we speak about abuse. Is it just sexual abuse? Is it emotional abuse, mental abuse, or just for you, is it just more centered around, sexual abuse?
It's centered with all types of abuse. Um, when it comes to child abuse and abuse in general, it's complicated because oftentimes there's other types of abuse that happen simultaneously, but we only focus on one type of abuse. Say that a child is getting sexually abused on a consistent basis. We may look at it and say, oh, it's just sexual, but we don't look at it as how it's emotionally defiling the child and how the person's verbally attacking or using such language that makes the child fearful, and that is a compounded of abuse. The story in itself is about emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse. It's a lot of abuses inside the story, but even though it's a story about abuse, I want the readers to understand that there is triumph after abuse. It's not like you've been abused, you're totally defiled, no one wants you, this is just your life, this is your stamped title, and that's it. I want people to understand that you can go through the worst of the worst and you can come out badass. This does not make you who you are. This is something that happens to you. This is not who you are, and you can do bigger and better things. But you do have to go through the healing process. You do have to go through the journey. And that in itself can be just as traumatic as experiencing abuse because the vulnerability is at an all-time high. You really can't go through the healing process but don't want to confront the past. It goes hand in hand.
Okay, so what you're saying is the average person who may get abused, or yourself, however you want to phrase it, doesn't necessarily have to come out an abuser themselves. You can actually break out of the cycle, what they normally say.
Definitely. You don't have to become a molester because you were molested or become a rapist because you have been raped. That's a major misconception that people put in and put out there, that if it happens to you, then you're going to do it. Everything is choices. We all have choices. And just outside of abuse in general, we have choices that we make on a daily basis of what we want to do and what we don't want to do. But it does show that if you don't deal with the trauma, if you don't deal with the hurt, the pain, etc., then it will manifest in different aspects of your life. And one of them are becoming predators. A lot of predators were praised once before, but not all victims and survivors will become predators. That's not necessarily true. But like I said, you have to be open to healing and, going through those emotions and those thoughts of when you were abused. A lot of people like to think that because you were so young and it happened so long ago, it doesn't affect you, but everything affects you. I mean, you could fall and, get a you can fall and open your knee and get a scar. That scar may never go away, and that's a reminder of you, cutting your knee. So something as traumatic as being raped when you're a child, that doesn't go away.
Yeah, that's true. Um, Without giving away the book, let us know some of these steps that maybe someone has gone through, just like how you went through. What are some of the steps or the trials you must overcome, at least getting in the tunnel to get out?
I think giving your time space, giving yourself enough space to just process. Like I said, oftentimes we're so ready to just push and move and just keep on going, and we never take the time to actually stop and just process and feel. A lot of times we don't have the chance, or we feel like we don't have the chance to just grieve. I remember when I really was going into my book and I had to talk about the first experience of being sexually violated, I cried for the young girl that was me. I cried for that 7-year-old. I've never taken the time out to feel what it felt like to be violated. And many victims don't take the time out to just process. And it may not be crying. It may be journaling, it may be meditation, it may be anything, but just allowing yourself to be in that moment and to completely collapse in that moment and build yourself up is something that's very necessary.
Okay, so what is something that, being that, looking back at that young person, what would you tell another young girl who may be the same age or a little older? What can you tell them? Like, I know a lot of people, they think back and they say, if I can do it all over again, what would you tell that young girl?
I would tell that young girl to tell. And I know that when we're children, because we all have these conversations, not even just a racial thing, across boards, we all tell our children to tell, but we never really go into details about how you tell, or if you do tell, I'm not going to judge you, I'm not going to think that you're wrong, I'm not going to make you feel bad. And a lot of victims either feel like they have to protect their parents, or maybe they did something wrong because they were preyed upon or something of that sort. And if I could go back to the young version of me, or just to any young girl, tell someone that you feel comfortable telling. And sometimes it may not be your parents. Maybe you have a close older friend or another family member or teacher. But having that trauma happen to you and holding that inside, it's like an internal baggage, and it weighs on you just like anything else, just like carrying weights. It pulls you down. And I don't think any person, especially a young child, should be carrying that weight. And that's what I would tell any young girl seeing this, or who might see this, or even going back, if I could go back to me being a child, is just to tell. And it's hard to tell because you feel like you're dirty. Now you feel like you've been, defiled. But I don't want anybody to feel like that. I would never want someone to feel like they're guilty for the actions of someone else.
And that's understandable. But, and excuse me if I don't phrase this the right way, but as a young child who has gone through that, how do you trust anybody to tell that to? An adult, if we're not, at that point you're not an adult to say, I was touched the wrong way, and you have a certain trust level as an adult. How do you tell a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old who has been felt ashamed to trust anybody, whether it's another friend or a parent or a teacher? How can they trust?
Trust is something that is very fragile, and not just for a child, just for people in general. once trust has been broken or trust has been corrupted, it's hard to gain trust back, not just with the person who's done it, but with anybody. But I would say that to evaluate who's in your life and who generally cares for you, because you may not feel comfortable with trusting people, and it might not be someone in your life. It may be, everybody in your life isn't someone you can come to. It isn't someone that you can trust, but you can look at other people outside of your family, outside of your friends, who are there to help. Like, for example, most children are told police officers are there to help you. Maybe no one in your family you feel like you can trust. Maybe no one in your circle of friends you feel like you can trust. But your teacher is there to help you. Police officers are there to help you. So you might not know them personally, but you know their title and you know that they're here to help. So maybe outside of your family and outside of your friends, you might need that support system.
Okay. So I've known one or two people, and if you feel comfortable, maybe you're not that comfortable with telling a teacher or whoever, would it be a little simpler? Because people do they say they notice a child drawing pictures, and it's inappropriate pictures, and they realize, hey, something's wrong. Would it be something easy for a child to maybe write it down and pass to the teacher, or write it down and give to someone who they can trust, because they might not be comfortable speaking about it? Would you recommend that?
I would recommend that because communication, 90% of communication isn't verbal. So a lot of it is body language. I mean, there might be a child who says inappropriate things, not because they've been abused, but because there's been mature adult content in front of that child, and that child is just taking on that. And some children, they might draw out their abuse, which does happen, or they feel more comfortable writing it out. In whichever way a child feels like they can express themselves, I don't think we should, tell them that's wrong or this is the right way to do so. If the child is coming to you, that's a great sign, because most won't. But if the child is coming to you and they're just not verbally saying it, however they're telling you, we should accept that and we should welcome that, because then we can get the appropriate help that the child needs.
Okay, and that's helpful, but not but. I should say, moving forward to adulthood. How does that? There's a lot of talk about how it affects your personal life when you get older. How do you see yourself, without getting too personal, uh, being in a relationship or trying to start a family, being that being that this has happened?
Um, you can have healthy relationships, you can start a family, you could do anything as a quote unquote normal person does. But I will say that you do need to go through healing, because you've noticed, especially people will say jokes like, if you've been molested, you're probably going to be a stripper, or, going to have daddy issues. And I totally do not agree with these stereotypes. I think they're totally wrong. But I will admit that if you don't seek healing, you will tend to find someone and seek someone like your abuser. Or you may find people who don't really want the best for you. And you do really need to exhale and go through those emotions so you can do and pick better people to be around. And I'm not blaming any victim or any survivor of child abuse, but if you don't deal with that trauma will come out in different forms. And you may, like I say, find a mate that isn't the best for you, or you might have children and may not be able to carefully watch over your children. This is how we have in certain families generational curses, where everybody in the family has either been raped or molested or something of that sort. So having a family, being in relationships, go for it. We all desire that. But what I will say is take the time out to actually confront your past so your future can be brighter and just as bright as anybody else's future who has never gone through any type of abuse.
Okay, so if someone wanted to buy your book or they wanted to learn more about this, where can they go?
They can go to Amazon Kindle August 1st. Like I said, my book is titled Memoirs of a Forgotten Child. It will be available August 1st of this year on Amazon Kindle. You can also go to my website, www.vieisme.com, to read more about the book and, my background history. And also, because I do blogging and I do vlog, you can watch my weekly videos and my intellectual blogs. And also, if you follow me on social media like Instagram and Facebook, I expose excerpts from Memoirs of a Forgotten Child for free, and you can read them, you can share them, you can tell me your opinions of them. I want people to know about the book and get a feel for it before they purchase it. So definitely follow me on Instagram, VIEIS_ME, and you can find them there, or on my Facebook, Vie Cine.
Now, this is something I probably should have asked a long time ago, but why the Forgotten Child? Why Memoirs of the Forgotten Child? What's the story behind that?
Because abused children are forgotten. When a child is abused, there's a good chance that that child was not properly watched over. And like predators will tell you, they target certain children because they realize that they don't have the necessary protection as other children, so they go after that specific child.
That's our hearts go out to you. Whatever we can do to help you, if you need any help, or as far as emotionally or mentally, or even with the book, we'd be glad to help you with anyone in the distress of what's going on in their lives. So just what other projects are you working on as far as either a backlash from the book, maybe a documentary series, or a part two to a book, or what other adventures do you think you'll have coming up in the near future?
In the near future, exactly right after Memoirs of a Forgotten Child is released, I'll be working on part two, because the story does center around trauma, but I want you to see how trauma shapes a person. So even though it wasn't like I was abused and raped every year, but you will see the decisions and the person that I became and the thought patterns that I had, all stemming from abuse. So I want the readers to follow me through the ages of 0 to 13, which is Memoirs of a Forgotten Child. But the next part will be 13 to early adolescence to maybe even late adolescence, and what I became from that abuse, and even maybe a part 3 of how I became the person that I am today, the healing process, the journey. So I really want to give people a complete scope of it. I don't want it to be a sad story. I don't want it to be a pity party. I want people to understand that you could be at your lowest of lows. You can go through the worst of the worst, and you can still come out and conquer and overcome and do the biggest and the best things that you want to. But you have to take your life by the reins and do it. Don't let abuse get the best of you. Don't let abuse be your title. Find your purpose, pursue your purpose, and there you go.
Now, how do you do that? At what point can one person say what their purpose may be? Because I'm pretty sure, I've never been abused, so I really don't know how to question it or say it without offending people. But after a traumatic experience like that, and you're feeling lost, or you're feeling, like you said, dirty, or just ashamed of yourself maybe, and like I said, part of my ignorance, but I really don't know how to verbally communicate it. How do you feel like you can actually stand up and say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do now?
I think for everybody it's different. Some people they need to hit their lowest or their lows. Some people they get some type of inspiration. They're like, you know what? If so and so did it and they've been through what they've been through, then I can do it and I can, seek healing. It all depends on the person because you can't force anybody to go do something that they don't want to do or talk about something that they don't want to talk about. All you can do is present the option and they can take the option. I mean, me at 24 right now, if you would have told me I would have written a book about abuse and I would have talked about it, I made vlogs about it, I would have made YouTube videos about it, I'd have been like, no, I'm not doing that. That's not me. I don't even know what you're talking about. I would have denied it because at that time I wasn't ready to have this conversation. I wasn't ready to confront it. You can't make somebody go through something or speak on something, even if they know it personally, if they're not ready to. Everybody has their moment where they say, you know what, I want to do it. And maybe you may start and then say, I don't want to do it anymore or take a break or whatever the case may be. But that person has to be willing to go through it on their own terms.
So this is something that you can't. Everyone is different as what I'm getting. So there's not one milestone where someone came up to you and held you by the hand and said, let's do whatever the case may be. So everyone has to come to a point in their life where mentally they're ready to take action. Am I communicating that properly?
Yes. That actually reminds me of, a lot of states have times, I forgot the word for it, but where you have a certain period where you could report rape or molestation, and after that time you can't speak about it anymore. And what people don't really understand is that you need time to process. It's not just it happens to you and it happens to you and you're just trying to conceal it. You have to let yourself go through that and acknowledge that, yes, this happened to me. Yes, it made me feel horrible. And yes, it almost devastated me. You need that time, and it may take you 15 years. You have women who can't talk about it, and they found the courage to talk about it when they're elderly because it was just so traumatic and they didn't even want to acknowledge it. So I don't think that you can force somebody into speaking about it. And I also don't believe that there needs to be a certain time period when you talk about your trauma. And I understand because of evidence, and you want to collect the evidence and you want to, prosecute the person and have that time. But sometimes it may take a person a decade. It may take a person until 60 to say that this has happened to me because they're not ready.
Okay. Now, one last question before we go. And
Statute of limitations.
Yeah, here we go. Once you get old enough, we spoke a little bit about it with relationships and things like that, but do you feel that this is something that, and I don't know your personal status, but if you were to get married or in a relationship with someone, is this something that you feel that you're able to talk about with your spouse, or anyone could come to a level where they actually feel free to speak to at least your spouse and say, hey, this is what happened to me? Or do you feel like it's too embarrassing to say, I don't want them to know because they might not want me? How does that come into play?
Personally, for me, at this stage of my life, I can't deny it, not only because I've written a book about it, but I feel liberated enough to speak my truth, so no one can hold that against me. I do not feel shamed. I do not feel guilty. I do not feel fearful. So that's why I speak about it so liberally. Like, I don't break down about it, not because it doesn't hurt and not because it wasn't traumatic. It doesn't have a hold on me. It's an experience that happened. Yes, traumatic. Yes, it shaped who I was, but I am more than that little girl who was abused. And some people, they may be comfortable telling their spouse, but they may not be comfortable with telling their spouse. And you shouldn't push it. I mean, some people, they say that they can tell, which is true. Some people, they can tell something that's happened to their spouse, but they're not going to force them, or maybe the spouse isn't ready to talk about it. You just got to take it, one step at a time. The spouse may tell you something has happened to me as a child, but they don't really elaborate what that something is. And as a supportive husband or as a supportive wife, you need to let that person know that whatever you have to tell me, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to shame you. I'm not going to think less of you. But whenever you're ready, I'm here to listen. And when you say something like that, you have to actually mean it. If the person just tells you, no, I was violated, and that's all they want to tell you, take it for what it is. They may come back to you 2 weeks later and elaborate what violated means, but it has to be at that person's time and speed to reveal what they need to reveal. And you have to be as supportive and as understanding and as loving as they would wish that you are.
Well, that was very helpful. And we thank you for coming up on the show to talk about this very sensitive issue. And like I said, whatever help you need to promote this, or even talking to young people, we're here to help push this, because it happens once too many times. And we just want to let you know that we're sorry for what happened, but we're also happy that you're able to talk about it, and we're here to help the people who it's affecting in secret. So we want to thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for opening your platform to me so I can speak about this.
And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, Rashid Hafiz here with the showcase. See you again soon.